guys, it's Ariana. Welcome back to my channel. So as per usual, I have my Wicca candle in here, making the home smell like caramel apples. Use the fact that I'm not wearing any makeup. We are in the middle of a record-breaking heat wave. It has been like, I'm in Canada, so it's been like 35 degrees for the last week, and I am slowly dying because I do not have air conditioning. I have like one of those little window AC units that like cools down one room. But if I was to have it on while I'm filming, you guys would hear it and like that just wouldn't sound good. So I am so freaking warm. So we're gonna try to not melt while we read this story. This is a very long story. It is very creepy. I'm giving you a heads up now. It is a no sleep story, so it is a fictional story, but it is so well written, it is so creepy, and I think you guys will really enjoy this one, and it's going to be a longer style video because it is a really long story. Oh my god, guys, I am melting. I am so freaking hot. It is so warm in my freaking room. That's where my studio is. Also, I am moving at the middle of August to a house. I just bought a house with my fiance, and we are moving in August. So for probably about 2 weeks in August, I will not be filming. I will not be filming TikToks. I will not be filming shorts. I will not be filming on YouTube because I will be packing up my entire house and moving it. So bear with me when I don't post for a little while in August. It's because I am moving. And if you guys hear an airplane outside, I live currently very close to an airport, and there is always people going by in planes. Like, that's a helicopter. I don't even know why there's a helicopter going by at fucking 4 in the afternoon, but apparently there is. So please bear with me, ignore the helicopter. I hope you guys can't even hear it, but I'm sure you can because it is so freaking loud. My windows are closed too. My house is shaking. That is how close that helicopter was.
2,000 years later.
Okay, anyway. This is from the Reddit author, Mr. Creepypasta, and it is titled, "A Bus Stops in Front of My House Every Night, and I Think It Goes to Hell." So, trigger warning, this does mention death. It does mention a lot of gruesome things. So if that's not your vibe and you don't want to listen to the story, feel free to exit now. Otherwise, if that is your vibe, it's really creepy. For 7 days straight, an eerie blood red bus would stop in front of my house at 3:33 in the morning. This seemed strange, mostly because, like the vast majority of American towns, Frost Hollow had no public transportation at all. Even stranger, people always got on and off the bus whenever it stopped. They all looked extremely tall and thin, and whenever I tried to focus on their faces, it seemed like no more than a flesh-colored blur. On the 7th morning of the 7th day, I had called the sheriff's department to ask about it. I had no better ideas, and a woman with a thick southern accent answered the phone. "Morning, sheriff's office, how can I help you?" I hesitated, not knowing where to start with my odd story. I'm not really sure who to call about this, but there's a bus stopping in front of my house in the middle of the night, dropping people off. I live on Slaughterhouse Road, past the abandoned school. It's strange, because it only comes past 3 in the morning, and there are always people waiting to board it. I was rambling and sweating heavily at this point. I felt like a fool. The woman went silent for a brief moment. I could hear her slight breathing on the other end of the line, though. "Sir, we don't have any buses going to Slaughterhouse Road. There are no buses in the town at all, other than for public schools. At least not public transportation. Perhaps it's a private company? Did you see any company logo or information on the side of the bus? Maybe a route number or something? Sometimes nursing homes or medical facilities might have private buses for elderly people." I had been trying to avoid this subject, but now I had no choice but to reveal to her what I had saw. Yes, on the side of the bus, it said Inferno Express, and the route number was 666. I heard only a brief pause on the other end for a couple of seconds, and the woman was waiting for a punchline. A heartbeat later, I heard her hang up on me. I stood there listening to the whine of the dial tone, thinking and wondering. I knew I needed evidence of the mysterious night bus, and I felt determined to get it. At 3 a.m., I put on a black long-sleeve shirt, black sneakers, and black jeans, trying to make myself as inconspicuous as possible. Nervously, I grabbed my digital camera, and I headed outside. The night felt beautiful, warm, humid, with a soft breeze. I smelled the fresh summer air sweeping down the rolling hills. Trying to calm myself, I felt as if I was going out to commit a crime, rather than just trying to capture a video of a random bus in my own yard. I crept across the road, seeing the windows in my neighbor's house stood dark. The street I lived on consisted mostly of woodlands with a few scattered houses. There are plenty of good hiding spots, and I knew the bus stopped in front of a patch of marshy swampland a few hundred feet down the road, right on the border of my neighbor's property. I found some large, thick bushes near the street to hide behind, making sure I was far enough away to avoid being detected, while still maintaining a clear line of sight. I checked my watch, seeing the minute hand creep toward the penultimate moment. This was my last chance to leave. I felt a rising anxiety and uncertainty. Sweating heavily, I closed my eyes, waiting and listening. It seemed only seconds later that I heard the approaching rumble of a powerful engine echoed down the road. I went into action immediately, pressing the record button, and I turned the camera on myself, whispering, "Hello, my name is Landon Pierce." I was trying to get this all out before the bus got here. I live in Frost Hollow on Slaughterhouse Road. For the past week, a bus has been stopping in front of my house in the middle of the night. And the people on it, well, they don't look right. They're all extremely tall and very thin. So I'm here recording all of this. If something happens to me, if someone finds this. I let the sentence fade into nothing. The brakes in the bus squealed at a hellish caterwauling. I smelled exhaust and gasoline. A heartbeat later, the bus came into view, stopping only a stone's throw away from where I crouched, hiding in the thick shadows of the swampy bush. Mosquitoes constantly buzzed past my ears, landing on my neck and arms every few seconds, but I dared not move. I kept the camera steady, trying to quiet my breathing. I felt paranoid and watched, as if the people on the bus knew exactly where I was and what I was doing. The bus gleamed with fresh blood red paint. The windows looked like sideways eyeballs, long, dark, oval panes whose shadows contrasted heavily with the bright exterior. I checked to make sure the camera was recording, and satisfied to see the small red indicator light glowing brightly. I hoped that the people in the bus wouldn't see the slight glare of the screen or the red dot of the camera, if indeed they were even people at all. The door at the front slid open with the shrieking of a rusty metal. An interior light turned on inside the bus, glowing with a fiery radiance. All of the strange, eye-shaped windows shone with bright scarlet illuminations. It danced and it strobed, sending long shadows skittering down the swamp. At the front, I saw a driver in a black suit with white buttons and a high polished boots, almost reminding me of the garb of an SS officer. He looked extremely tall. 2 lidless black eyes bulging from his head, like the eyes of some monstrous praying mantis. They looked nearly the size of oranges. I gasped as he turned to look in my direction. I wondered if those enormous eyes could see the tiny red dot on my camera. And to my horror, my question was answered moments later. Tall, faceless silhouettes stepped off the bus, appearing suddenly in the crimson light. I looked through the screen of the camera, zooming in to try to see any signs of eyes or mouths or even noses. Yet, the recording showed everything clear enough. They had smooth, featureless flesh stretching across their egg-shaped heads. Their arms stretched down nearly to their feet. Their fingers long and twisted like the gnarled roots of a tree. Around their bodies, I saw orange jumpsuits, like those prisoners in the area wore. Their smooth, hairless skin rippled slightly, moving in and out of these strange creatures like they were breathing through it. A few of these bizarre creatures entered the woods and swamps, diverging in different directions. One of them went towards my neighbor's house, creeping around the side with exaggerated, eerie steps. It glanced in the windows with its eyeless face, putting its long fingers around the sides of its head as if it was trying to block out a glare of a non-existent sunlight. It was as if these things, these abominations, had only heard about human mannerisms through word of mouth. It tiptoed forward on dull black shoes and seemed twice as long as any normal human foot. The bus stayed unmoving in front of me, its engine idling loudly, the door hanging open. I saw the driver pushing himself up off his massive chair. He slunk forward, bowing his smooth, hairless head as he exited the threshold. Like the other faceless creatures, he tiptoed forwards in exaggerated, almost childlike manner, his bulging black eyes glittering. He looked completely insane. He kept his arms raised, drawing the claw-like hands back and forth with every overemphasized step he took. I realized with a mounting horror that he appeared headed directly in my direction. A few moments later, I was certain of it. His head ratcheted up to face me, his eyes appearing more excited and manic than before. My heart was hammering in my chest as I looked around for a way out. The hairless chalk-white face grinned with a psychotic gleam as the driver quickly pushed his way through the thick bushes of the border of the road, his gaze never faltering, his eyes never leaving mine. At that moment, a fear like I had never experienced before shot through my entire body. I stumbled to my feet, turning to sprint blindly into the forest. But behind me lay a swamp. As soon as I took a single step, my foot sunk deeply into the earth. Brown water flooded over the moss covering the ground in a superficial layer as it collapsed under my weight. I swore, my arms windmilling as I nearly fell forward into the water. But a hand shot out, grabbing me by the neck and yanking me back. The hand felt burning hot, as if the flesh of the owner had an extreme case of a fever. My digital camera slipping out of my hands, falling into the swampy water with a thud. "Get off me!" I screamed, trying to grab at the hand holding my neck with an iron grasp. I was still facing away from the bus at this point, but I felt myself being pulled backwards. Stumbling, I tried not to fall. My foot caught a sharp rock and a root, but the sharp fingers on the hand never loosened. It would just pull me back to my feet. The fingers dug into my flesh with an agonizing pain. I felt small trickles of blood running down my back and the sides of my neck. As we got back to the pavement, the driver threw me down hard in front of the bus. I felt skin tear along my knees and my elbows. I sensed that I had many cuts and bruises. I then raised my head, slowly blinking my eyes. I looked up through the open door, seeing an enormous driver's seat sitting empty. It took me a few minutes to realize what I was actually seeing. But when I did, a sense of horror like a lightning strike smashed down upon me. The steps were made of human bone. Arm and leg bones placed side by side, covering the entire surface of the stairs. Many looked yellowed and cracked with age, but others seemed much more fresh, the bones smoother and whiter. The driver's chair was even more horrifying. Hundreds of grinning human skulls composed the guts of the chair, rising all the way to the ceiling. There was human skin covering the front of the seat. Countless human teeth stuck out of the skin, their roots embedded in the supple flesh. The teeth rose up to the top of the bus in crisscrossing diagonal patterns. I glanced back at the driver, seeing his thin body looming over me. One inhumanely long arm pointed at the open door of the bus. It reminded me of the Grim Reaper showing the way forwards to the recently departed. He stood without speaking, his eyes glittering with insanity, and he had a grin plastered across his smooth, white face. I pleaded, "Don't make me get on it. I should never have come out here." The driver stayed as still as a corpse with a face like a grinning death mask. I saw a movement behind me, realizing 2 tall, faceless humanoids had appeared in bright jumpsuits to board the bus. They came up beside the driver, their blurry heads bowing down to look at me, if indeed they could see at all without the eyes. I wasn't sure whether these creatures were just mimicking human gestures or movements or what. Without warning, the 2 humanoids scuttled forward, their rail-thin arms reaching out to me. I tried to crawl away, but moments later, I felt them wrap my wrists. Their skin felt also burning hot and feverish. They lifted me up. I was screaming, trying to call for help from my neighbors, but no help arrived. They pushed me through the door to the fiery red light beyond. In every seat, I saw tall, emaciated people with smooth faces. The skin rippled and disordered when I tried to look at their heads. The 2 creatures holding me forced me towards the back. There was a boy, sat looking terrified and alone. They threw me into a seat, turning and walking away immediately after. From the front of the bus, I heard the door slowly closing with a squeal of rusted joints. The driver was now back in his seat, and I looked up, seeing him staring into the rearview mirror at me, grinning. "How'd you get here?" the boy asked in a small voice. I turned to look at him in wonder, his pale skin heavily contrasted with his dark eyes and black hair. With his high cheekbones, he had a slightly vampiric look. "I don't know. I was kidnapped? What's going on? Who are these people? Where are they taking us?" I was whispering, constantly looking up to see if we were being watched. Yet the faceless humanoids stayed still in their seats. Their blurry heads pointed straight ahead, totally frozen and unmoving. Only the driver showed any signs of life as he put the bus in drive and slowly pulled forward. They're taking us to the playpen. They showed it to me in my dreams. I used to see these people looking in my windows at night, people without faces, who looked really strange. I told my parents about it. They thought I was just having nightmares. But when I fell asleep, they showed me everything. "What did you see?" I asked, and his face went pale. He just shook his head. "I don't think you really want to know," he answered. "Both of us will be there soon enough, and then you'll see." I found out that the guy's name was Ian, and I told him mine was Landon. He said he was from the other end of Frost Hollow, and that he had been on the bus for days without food or water. It circles around to different towns. I looked out the window, seeing a dark desert all around us, sand dunes swirled on both sides of an endless highway. I hadn't noticed when the world outside had shifted from forest to desert. Those things without faces, they come in people's houses, they get inside their heads and in their dreams. They make you think horrible things. I call them the stalkers. Well, that's a good enough name, I guess, for them. Still staring out the window at the shadowy, endless dunes. We're not getting out of this, are we? I mean, alive? Probably not, he said, his voice hopeless and dead. On the horizon of the dead, dark desert, a black monolith rose high in the air. In general shape, it looked like a lighthouse, but it had no windows, and its outer walls looked like polished obsidian or onyx. It appeared to rise hundreds of stories into the cloudless sky. The bus started slowing down. The crimson light lit up overhead. I looked forward, realizing that the stalkers had turned their blurry heads now to stare straight back at me. The driver, too, continuously looked at us through the rearview mirror as the bus came to a stop. Now arriving, the playpen. A robotic voice intoned calmly through the speakers built into the walls. The door of the front flew open. Except for the idling of the engine, everything went a deathly silent. "I think they want us to get out," he whispered nervously, slowly getting to his feet. I wanted to say no, to fight back, but with dozens of faceless stalkers staring at us in the eerie, frozen poses they had, my courage failed. On unsteady legs, I got to my feet and I followed Ian down the walkway. The faces of the stalkers turned to follow us, seeming to blur and ripple faster with excitement. I wondered what would happen once we got outside. But in reality, I had no inkling of the horrors ahead. As I stepped down into the inky pavement of the street, I realized that this desert felt freezing. Wind swept across the dunes at tremendous speeds. Clouds of dark sand obscured the black sky. The bus door stayed open, all of its passengers watching us with interest. The driver, too, never took his eyes off me and Ian. I wanted to get far away from these creepy stalkers. I mentioned to Ian that we should go. I said over the roaring winds, putting a hand on Ian's shoulder. He flinched away, looking small and scared. But side by side, we started walking down the road. It wasn't long before we found our first body. A mummified corpse lay on the side of the street, its dried flesh sticking tightly to the bone. Its eyeless sockets stared straight up. Its open mouth looked like it was frozen in a silent scream. A black hole filled with sand. Ian then let out a strangled cry as he saw it falling back. I mentioned that it was going to be okay, and he shook his head, pointing vigorously at the desiccated corpse. I followed the line of his finger, realizing something strange was happening. The corpse had begun to shake and rattle. It splayed out, limbs jumping up and down. The ragged strands of the cloth still covering its chest and legs ripped apart with a soft tearing sound. Wet, black tentacles, covered in dozens of eyes, rose up, snapping apart the remaining bones and flesh with ease. As the ribs jutted up like spikes, something hellish then slithered out. It rolled on its tentacles, a ball of slithering limbs covered in something slick and shiny. Though the size of a small dog, it splayed out, its width and height doubled. It had no head or central mass, but its many eyes constantly blinked in a chaotic and random pattern. The eyes looked blue and human-like, bloodshot and dilated with complete fury. "Get away from it," Ian screamed with terror I had never heard in someone's voice before. He ripped at my arm, pulling me back. I stumbled, nearly falling. The tentacles creature slithered down towards us at incredible speeds, its many eyes focused ahead, insane and furious. As we turned, I glimpsed stalkers watching us from the sides of the street. Their blurred faces stayed hidden in the sandstorm blowing past, but but I saw their tall, inhuman silhouettes in the darkness. They reminded me of spectators watching gladiators dying in a coliseum. "What is it?" I shrieked over the roaring winds. "What happens if it catches us?" Ian was breathless with horror, sprinting ahead of me. He was a very fast guy. "Don't let it catch you," he screamed back. I realized the monolith stood ahead, and it was only a few hundred feet. A powerful current of hope surged through my heart as I saw a massive threshold filled with white light. But as I got to within the stone's throw away, I felt something warm and slick close around my ankle. I screamed as I fell forward, seeing Ian disappear through the doorway, his silhouette sharp and clear for a moment before the white light swallowed him. "God damn it, help me," I cried. Crawling towards the white light, I kicked and I struggled against the tentacles, wrapping around my leg like a grip like a squeezing metal bands. I dragged my hands through the sand as I felt myself pulling back, my head smacking hard against the pavement underneath. Stars now dancing in front of my vision. In the gloom of the darkness swimming against unconsciousness, I glimpsed more of the stalkers, always watching from a distance. Their flesh seemed to ripple with excitement at the prospect of witnessing imminent death and dismemberment. As more tentacles wrapped around me, I looked back. Only inches away, furious, dilated eyes stared back. The tendrils shot towards my mouth as others held my head in place. I didn't know what it would do once it got inside me, but I knew instinctively it wasn't going to be good. I heard a hoarse shout just then, and I felt something smash into the creature on my chest. I felt the tentacles suddenly retract from my face and head, the eyes turning to look at whatever new threat had just arrived. A tall man with a long beard and haunted eyes stood above me, holding a homemade stone club. It looked like it had been whittled from sandstone. The end formed into a jagged point. The tentacle creature hissed like a snake as the man bashed it once again. Finally, mercifully, it released me and rolled away, coughing and sputtering. "Run, you idiot!" the man cried, smashing the creature through one of its many eyes with a sharp point of the end. The eye exploded in a shower of black blood, the creature hissing, escalating into the distorted wail that split and echoed like hundreds of voices screaming at once. I didn't need more encouragement than that. Shell-shocked and terrified, I scrambled to my feet, sprinting the last few steps towards the threshold. I looked back to see the man running behind me, the tentacle creature hissing and gurgling as it was pursuing us. Together we fell through the doorway of the white light. As soon as we crossed the threshold, the creature stopped, his eyes furiously blinking and glaring. A few heartbeats later, it rolled away, its silhouette disappearing into the shadowy dunes outside. "Well, that star spawn just about got you," the man said, clasping me on the shoulder. "Good thing I was coming back this way. I went out hunting." He showed me a dead rattlesnake slung around his back. "I'm Teddy." He reached out his hand to me, but I only just stared at him. He let it drop after a moment. "Star spawn?" He nodded eagerly, his brown eyes gleaming. He looked extremely thin and malnourished, and the clothes he wore were frayed and falling apart. I wondered how long he had been trapped here. "That's what I call them. They come off the black god. Parts of his body sometimes fall off when he's sleeping, little parts here and there. But they regrow into those things. The star spawn. If they get their tentacles down your throat, it's pretty much game over. A little piece of them breaks off and it starts regrowing in your stomach, eating away at your organs and muscle until it decides to break through. It's not a fast death either. You might be in excruciating pain for weeks before you die." I looked around the room in the black tower where we stood. A massive chamber with gleaming obsidian walls surrounded us, extending up dozens of feet into a flat black ceiling. There, a bright spotlight pointed down at us, illuminating the room in white light. Stairs made out of the same stone spiraled up to the outer perimeter of the circular room, disappearing into the gap in the ceiling. "Did my friend come through here?" I asked. "Do you know where he is?" What's your friend's name, stranger?" he asked. I laughed uncertainly, then introduced myself. "Well, he must be upstairs with the others." "The others?" I asked. "Well, you're not the only refugee here, Landon," he answered. "The bus brings more victims all of the time, from all over the world. A lot of them don't last, though. The star spawn often get them, and if they don't, the stalkers hunt them down and torture them to death. I've seen a lot of bodies skinned alive, people who just simply got caught." "Well, okay, let's go up, I guess." I wanted to make sure that my friend was okay. I walked up the stairs with Teddy at my heels, rising through the gap in the ceiling. Here, there was an even larger chamber rising up thousands of feet into the air. Towards the top of it, I saw something massive and black with thousands of tentacles. It stuck to the flat ceiling, slick and wet, and countless enormous eyelids on its limbs tightly closed in sleep. Drops of slime occasionally fell down from the creature's body, landing on the floor with soft spatterings. I saw an old woman sitting next to a small fire with Ian by her side. She had a rattlesnake on a spit and was cooking it. Ian had a leather satchel of water in his hand, which he drank from thirstily before passing it back to her. I remember him saying he had been trapped on the bus for days, and I wondered if he had any food or water that whole time, but I doubted it. I walked forwards, waving and smiling, feeling much more hopeful, seeing Ian alive and well. I glanced nervously up at the tentacle monstrosity, uncertain of whether I should be afraid. "The Black God sleeps above us," the old woman whispered. "Do not wake him." "We must escape before he awakes," Teddy said fruitfully, putting a calloused hand on my shoulder. "We are going to try to hijack the bus. It is the only way back between worlds. If we stay here, we all will certainly die. It's only a matter of time. But if we can kill the driver..." "What about the stalkers?" I asked. "It's not just the driver." "Whatever's on the bus, the Black God is far worse," the man whispered. His sleep becomes more troubled as time passes. We see his tentacles twisting with his nightmares. Once he awakens, those nightmares will spread through the playpen. Right now, we are only hunted by the star spawn and the stalkers. "I met an old man who saw the Black God awaken once," the old woman said. "When I got here, he was still alive. But every few months, the Black God comes alive to feed. And he said that the corpse walk when that happens. The dead scream and the sky rips apart, and everything moving gets hunted down like vermin to be absorbed into the Black God's flesh, where they live for weeks, being slowly digested and driven insane by pain." "Well, how did he survive?" I asked. "He said he hid in the bus. The driver gets out sometimes to hunt, and he snuck in. The Black God missed him, but he was the only one." I found out the old woman's name was Jackie. Like Teddy, she wanted to get out of the playpen immediately. "The stalkers and Starspawn won't come in here. They're too afraid of the Black God." "And rightly so," Teddy muttered. "It's suicidal to be in here. That thing could wake up at any moment, and we'll be the first ones sucked into hell if he does. I've heard the screams of people being eaten by the Black God's flesh, and it sounds like they're being burned alive." Went on for weeks. "Stop it," Jackie insisted. "You're scaring them." I looked over at Ian, seeing that she was right. He looked ready to pass out, his skin turning chalk white. Jackie pulled the roasted rattlesnake off the spit, ripping it apart with her hands and handing a piece of it to Ian and Teddy. She then looked at me, her wrinkled face cocked. "Do you want a piece?" I shook my head, feeling slightly nauseous just looking at the dead, burnt snake. Its head was still attached to his body even, its open eyes blackened and staring. "So, what's the plan then? How do we get back?" Teddy looked at me, chewing a mouthful of rattlesnake. He lifted his homemade sandstone club, then nodded past Jackie. I followed his line of sight. "That's it? We're going to bludgeon the driver and all of the stalkers and steal the bus? Do you have a better idea?" he answered. In truth, I didn't. The four of us went back out of the stone monolith that held the Black God, seeing the endless paved road disappearing into the horizon. Armed with the primitive stone, we walked side by side, constantly scanning the darkness for enemies. "There are bodies everywhere," Teddy said, over the roar of the wind. "Most of them have star spawn hiding inside." I wondered how often the bus came this way, but at that moment, all chaos broke out. I saw the star spawn with one punctured eye rolling furiously down the pavement. I pointed, screaming, when something ran into me from the side. I fell hard onto Ian, knocking both of us down. We went sprawling in the sand as two stalkers stood overhead, their insane faces blurring and jerking from side to side, as arms as long as human twisted towards me. Sharp fingers jabbed down my face, and in a blinding moment of absolute panic and agony, I felt one puncture my eye. I screamed, jerking back as they ripped and crumpled my eye. I felt it explode with a powerful jet of blood and fluid. My vision went white with agony. At that very moment, I saw headlights through the haze of pain and terror. In my shell-shocked state, I barely realized that the bus was speeding down the road. The small star spawn hissed with an animal hunger before a tire ran it over, causing black blood to explode from it like a water balloon filled with sludge. Teddy came behind the stalker, bringing his heavy stone club down on the back of its head. I heard a wet crack of bone as it fell limply on top of me, its fingers still clutching my dismembered eye. I realized that the optic nerve and blood vessels were still attached, running along a few inches from the mutilated socket. I pushed myself to my feet with a rush of adrenaline, feeling the vessels rip apart like snapping string. I nearly passed out, but Ian and Teddy came to my sides, each putting a steadying hand around my back. The bus stopped in front of us, the door shrieking open. As the first of the stalkers descended the step, I heard a primal scream coming from behind us. From the direction of the monolith, I looked back in terror, seeing the top of it explode in a shower of volcanic stone as massive tentacles hundreds of feet long reached blindly out. The black god pulled itself up, like a colossal sitting on top of the world, its many gigantic eyes glaring down. "It's starting," Teddy screamed. "We need to get out to the bus now." Staggering, I watched the three of them run forwards. I followed behind, feeling weak and sick. With my one remaining eye, I saw the driver descending the stairs, his black eyes bulging as he stared up at the sky. I realized with horror that the clouds had started to rain fire. The flickering flames lit up the world as the black god roared with a primal scream. Teddy ran forward, raising the club to strike at the driver. Casually, almost lazily, the driver raised one hand, grabbing Teddy by the neck and lifting him off the ground. His sharp fingers stabbed into the skin and flesh, digging deeply as Teddy gurgled. He weakly brought the club down as the driver threw his broken body to the side of the road. Jackie and Ian ran at the driver together, closing in on them from both sides. Ian struck at the long, emaciated legs under the black suit. The driver slashed at Jackie's face, as bone cracked under the weight of Ian's blow. The driver buckled as his leg gave way, his furious, lidless eyes reaching towards Ian. As he fell, he reached forward, dragging Ian with him. I saw Jackie on the ground next to them, with a deep stab wound eating through her eye and into her brain. I stumbled forward, raising the club and bringing it down on the back of the driver's head. His head collapsed as he clawed and stabbed at me. I heard gurgles and weak cries as I jumped onto the bus. Sickened by all the blood and death, I ran up the steps, never looking back. Bleeding heavily and my vision turning white pain, I started the bus. The engine turned on immediately, rumbling and powerful. I had never heard such a sweet sound in all my life. I began driving ahead, down the freezing dark streets of the playpen. I felt my hands sticking to the steering wheel, my skin covered in gore and clotted blood. I glanced in the rearview mirror and I had to repress the urge to scream. Every seat was filled with the stalkers, their blurring faces looking straight ahead, their long mannequin-like bodies twisted and jerked. Like one single hive mind, they rose. Up ahead, the dark streets disappeared into a spiraling vortex of color. I accelerated, pushing the bus as fast as it would go, afraid to look back to see what the stalkers would do. I drove through the vortex, pushing the bus up to 70 to 80 miles an hour. The blinding torrent of crimson light dissolved to reveal my street, Slaughterhouse Road. I slammed on the brake, glanced back to see the stalkers only inches behind me, their twisted fingers reaching out to grab me. Their heads jerked from side to side, blurring and jumping. Their arms seemed to vibrate with seizure-like movements. I heard a cry like one voice, a sound of anticipation and bloodlust. I opened the door and I fell out of the bus as sharp fingers clawed at my head and skull. Fresh blood ran down my face as I crawled across the pavement, screaming and crying. Thankfully, one of my neighbors heard me and came out, shining a flashlight in my bloody, mutilated face. Soon after, I lost all consciousness. I remember waking up in the hospital, but my nightmares were always of the playpen and of the black god. And I think they always will be. And that's the whole story! I have no words. That is just the creepiest fucking story. The fact that you guys can just think this up and write it down is just too much for me. It is so freaking creepy. That was such a crazy story. It was playing out in my head like a movie on the screen. That is the scariest thing I've ever heard in my life. The fact that it took you to an unknown world and everybody except for the person writing the story freaking died. Oh my God, everything about that story was so freaking creepy. I loved it, but hated it at the same time. It was just really freaking creepy. This is where I'm going to end the video. We are at the 45-minute mark. I am too freaking hot. I need to turn my AC on. I need to edit this. I need to upload this. And I need to, I don't know, go stand in a cold shower for 10 minutes because I am dying. So thank you so much to the Reddit author that allowed me to read their story. This was Mr. Creepypasta. Thank you so much. You are very, very good at writing really creepy stories. And this one is gonna give me nightmares. I can just tell. This is a really creepy story. So if you want to read more of their work, I will list the story in my description box down below so you guys can go click it and you guys can read more of their creepy horror stories that they have. And thank you to all of you guys for watching my creepy stories. And if you guys made it to the end of the story, please feel free to leave me a Halloween emoji because this is just a really creepy story, and just leave me any type of emoji down in my comments down below to let me know that you guys made it to the end of the video. It helps me boost my video on the algorithm, and it really does help let YouTube know that you guys are interested in my video and want to engage with my video, and it helps them promote me on the feed. So again, sorry for not wearing any makeup. I would just probably have sweated it off by now if I had. So this is just my bare face. But if you guys have any creepy stories that you guys want to share with me, please feel free to reach out either over Instagram or over my email, and I will read all of your guys' terrifying tales if they are appropriate for my channel. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys at the next video. Bye!